G'day everyone. This is just going to be a real quick little breakdown of how I redesigned the Sentinel from Apex Legends using only white noise as a source. So the white noise I used is just from Serum's noise generator, so it just sounds like white noise. Big shock there. So when it comes to the Foley, you can see I've automated the panning and volume. That's doing the heavy lifting. So without any processing, it just sounds like this. So I added on some filter freak, some saturation, and some distortion, just to make it sound a bit more defined. So I added some denoise, some EQ, and transgressor. Transgressors in there just to add a bit more low end to some of the more transient areas, which makes it sound like a bit more like leather, in my opinion. Then finished off with some light reverb and smoothed it out a bit, which made it a little bit darker, but also sound a bit more like clothing. But like I said, automating the volume, the panning, and the pitch is doing most of the heavy lifting. So when it comes to the electricity, honestly, it's pretty straightforward. With white noise, you just add a bit of distortion however you want, and then a ring modulator. The ring modulator gives it a lot of the electrical quality. I can highly recommend the Melder series because a lot of their plugins are free, and a lot of them have the random button, which is really helpful for stuff like this, where you can keep clicking it and just filter through a ton of randomized textures. So a lot of this electricity is just different amounts of distortion with a bunch of different ring modulators on them. For this lower electricity sound, I messed around with adding a phaser to it and then actually de-clicking it, which gave it a really interesting texture. So a lot of this redesign was just going through tons and tons of presets for different plugins, seeing what kind of interesting stuff they create, and then building off of that. So for example, I used a lot of manipulator for the charge up sounds. So what I did was I found a cool preset, like No Expectations, and fiddled around. I think I put it to like 3 and put the shape up to like around there probably. And it made this cool sort of charge up sound. So what I did was I recorded that and then added just crystallizer and again another ring modulator to make it sound more electrical, and got this. After running them through manipulator and trash 2, I recorded the output and recorded 3 separate layers. This first layer is more like an unstable electric sound, which I used manipulator for, which had sort of a tremolo effect to it, and then I smoothed it out and added a ring modulator. I believe the original was white noise that I ran through trash 2, which gave it more of a harmonic high-end content, and then simply just adding a ring modulator to it. And then this final layer is more of a, again, like sci-fi electric spinning kind of sound, which I used manipulator on, which did this. Added EQ. Phaser. And then finished off with a ring modulator. This charge up layer, which is the exact same sample, just one slowed down and stretched out and pitched up a little bit. I got them again, just running white noise through manipulator. I believe it was this preset, Too Many Mushrooms, which you only need a little bit of white noise of, and it sort of just sets in motion this wacky sort of effects chain. So the whole thing together just sounds like this. So the gunshot I'm really happy with. It was just this simple little bit of white noise. Then I added some decapitator, transgressor again, a bit of filter freak, a very loud filter freak, some denoise and some EQ, nothing too insane. I then automated the low pass filter, so as the gun goes off, some of the high end gets taken away, as well as just automating the volume of the track to go down to. And with all of those on, I got a very nice sounding gunshot. I then added a little transient just before the gun shoots, which is put through a phaser, just a bass preset of manipulator, and some decapitator, which I feel makes the gunshot a little bit more interesting. For the base layer of the gunshot, it is just a lot of distortion, all of the high end taken out, a bit of transient shaping to give it an initial thump, some R bass to add more bass, and then declick to just get rid of any high-end clicks or pops. For the tail, it was just pure white noise with a very interesting EQ, 100% wet reverb with a small room size, and then a second reverb which had a much larger size to it. For the sort of echoey laser after the gunshot, it is run through Trash 2 with the Bang on Hollow preset. I turned down the mix just a little bit. I then EQ'd a decent amount of the bass out and got rid of a bit of the high end, and then just saturated it. And it sounded really good after going through Trash 2, so I didn't need to do a whole lot to it. But it just adds a lot of character to the gunshot, I think. So the weapon foley is probably something I struggled the most with. So this is it without any processing, just white noise. I ran it through Trash 2 just to give it a bit more crunch, and I messed around with the gate choker preset because I didn't want all of it coming through. I then added Crystallizer and R-Bass, which just gave it a bit more body. I then again added Transgressor, which just gave it a bit more thump on the more transient areas. Added OTT, which just made it really crunchy. And then EQ'd some of the bass out because it was a little too heavy. And the samples themselves have different volumes and are pitched differently just to add a bit more dynamics to it. And so it sounds like this. For the bullet casings, I actually copied the sound that I made for the spinning motor in the gun, because I had that more harmonic high-end content. And then what I did was I pitched it up a lot, chucked on a comb filter, took out all of the low and mid end, pitched it up even more, and then added a little bit of verb onto it just to give it that sort of ring. And then I automated the panning so it sounds like it flies off to your right. And then the ambience is super straightforward, turned way down in the mix with a very interesting EQ on it. And then this is what it sounded like all together. Alright, thanks for watching. I hope that made some sort of sense and wasn't just total gibberish.